and gentlemen, Team Slovakia will continue today's debate why banning political opinion polls is ensuring why political polls are causing less democracy in our society, and why we are losing valuable politicians. In my speech, I'll first go through the definitions. Then I'll talk about why do political polls cause the herd effect among voters. Secondly, I'll talk about why are we losing valuable politicians. And my second speaker is going to talk in the split argument about fund and amount of the voters. So first, let's look at the definitions. Under political polls, we understand pre-election polls, which show certain expected amount of voters for each candidate. And secondly, polls which are finding out the public support for various policies the government is for, or what are the opinions of the public. Our model is self-explanatory. We would ban the use of public polls, and if we would find out any are happening, we would enact a punishment. So, before further review, let's look at the first argument we're having, and it is the current effect which the election polls are causing in our society. So, we believe that political polls are influencing the election turnout. So, we believe that citizens who are willing to vote very strategically. So, first of all, they have certain sense of priorities and values which we want to pursue. Right? However, what is the issue in this situation is that people, once they see that their vote would be either wasted through the political vote, that the party they're proposing has too little of a support, they tend to go with the majority, with the closest one. And what this causes is that the person who the voter votes for is no longer his first priority. For example, we have seen in the case of Donald Trump. Once the polls came out, he was more heavily medialized, and therefore the medialization increased his polls again, and this sort of circled up until a moment where the election polls ultimately increased his public opinion. And why is this a bad thing? So we believe that since the election polls are changing your opinion, and it's not your first choice, we believe that politics are no longer reflecting the reality and the real opinions of the people that they have themselves. And what we consider is the impact of this is that there is less democracy. For example, you have two values that you really value, but you see that your prior party is not going to succeed, so you support the one principle you're standing for, and the other one goes away, and something else replaces it. And this is falsifying the reality and making our society less reflective. However, if we are to ban the use of political polls, we see that people will no longer be able to base their votes according to a person who they feel is going to get the most support by others, but they're going to decide by themselves. So, secondly, why is this, or now I'm going to explain why it is such an easily abusable thing, and why is this causing a tremendous danger to the society. So we believe that political wars are very easily abusable. Why do we think that? Because they can be very easily manipulated. We see that the methodology on which they're based is very complex. So we believe that if you only change the order of the politicians given on the sheet, then your change and your opinion according to who you're going to vote for example, changes. We see also it can be very easily manipulated by the survey sample. It is enough for the company who's making their survey, if he's paid by somebody to make this poll, to change their survey sample. Therefore, for example, instead of targeting certain part of the city, they're going to target a little bit different part of the city, and they're always going to receive different percentages. And since we see that it's already influencing the society, it's already influencing the voter turnout, we believe that the power to change election turnout is too strong since it can be abused. And we believe that this abusability is also showing us less democracy. And even if it's not willingly abused, it can be accidentally abused. There can be accidentally different results which already do not reflect reality. Second, we have seen this, for example, in the Green Party in Czech Republic, which have paid a company for their poll. So what happened is that within about 4 months, the support for this political party dramatically increased. When political scientists, once they analyzed this issue, they believe that the cause was that the success was due to the success of poll, which changed the public perception of the situation. Now I'll explain the point of information. To the second argument about why are we through politics losing valuable elections. Yes.
Why is it wrong for a minority to vote for the least oppressive other party, the party he would quite like is not going into power anyway?
No, we believe they can vote for them, but they feel that their vote is being lost in the process. They see that if a party is under, for example, the 5% representation which goes into the parliament, they see that it's not strategic for them to vote for that party because it's not going to get it anyway. So they give their vote to somebody who's going to make more use out of it since he's already getting into the politics and is supporting at least some part of what he's supporting. So the second argument, why are we through politics with political polls losing valuable politicians? So what do we see politics as and how it should be? We see politics as fight of certain ideology and thoughts between people and between different groups. So, and we believe that every person has this set ideology. Every political ideology reflects certain groups of principles which people are fundamentally standing for. However, what is happening in the status quo is that parties make their agendas and their programs especially based according to the popularity of different policies that the people are supported for. So we see that politicians are no longer supporting this ideology which is proposed. However, they're becoming pragmatic technologists and they're searching mostly for power. So, for example, how this can be better imagined is a situation in which you receive a poll, you see that there's 40% support for this policy and 50% for this policy, and you selectively choose according to the optimal target group which policies are you going to enact. Not because of the principal ideology you should be standing for, but because of the support, because of getting the election votes. Therefore, this system enables us to selectively choose politicians into politics based on how good they are at counting down the percentages of different polls and ensuring and seeing the public support. And they do not believe the policies themselves. They only believe in accumulating power in the situation. And why is this such a terrible thing? It's because they can be shifting their policies. We see multiple politicians shifting the policy throughout the term because they simply see that their mandate, the polls show differently, and therefore they're already changing their policy. Even though, and this can terribly harass the long-term development of a country. It means that if a country is working on a long-term policy, and these politicians who are selectively chosen to represent the target groups are changing, therefore countries can never really work on the long-term policies, and they have to adapt themselves to short-term public opinions on each situation. Which this especially includes, for example, economic situations when we're talking about austerity measures or when we're talking about boosting up the economy in certain ways. And if these choose, then the overall government policy is not as effective. We also see that, for example, in Slovakia, we see a party which is anti-immigration, a liberal agenda, and this is Slovakia. And we see that this selects out the quality politicians because they're simply not flexible enough for the polls to adapt themselves. So once somebody stands for an ideology, the polls are too diverse in public opinion, and they cannot pursue into the politics. And through our model, we believe we're changing this. We're improving the election turnout, which truly reflects the values of people, and we're improving the quality of politicians.
And now to open the case for the opposition, I call upon Arthur Lee.
We believe that in democracy, knowledge is power. And since polls grant politicians privileged knowledge, we stand for them. What is our stance? First, we support any and all polls to gauge the political pulse of a nation. We support them being administered by a whole range of organizations, like political parties, audited news organizations, or research institutes. Generally, we are talking about bodies like the New York Times or the Pew Research Center. Polls can be administered at any time, whether before electoral cycles or halfway through political terms. We are happy for polls to ask about anything, be it political alignment or specific issues. Moreover, we support the dissemination of poll results as well as the methodology and the sample size of these polls. We support other forms of political outreach like rallies and debates as well, so on. We're going to forward three arguments. First, that we improve democracy. Secondly, that we inform voters. And my second speaker will tell you why we increase accountability. But before that, let's clear the case by asking two questions. First, do polls really distort democracy? Secondly, do they really undermine representation? First of all, do they distort choice? They told us that polls lead to a herd mentality, where voters choose based on what other people decide. A number of responses. First of all, we put here that many firm and convinced voters will choose to vote for the parties that they want represented anyway. Like for instance, Republicans who firmly support Donald Trump will choose to vote for him in either case. But crucially, our second response is that there is nothing wrong with having your vote influenced by the choices and opinions of other people, because this merely feeds into your personal perspectives. This is no different from things like interviews, like rallies, like political debates, like talking to your friends about what choices you want to make in electoral decisions. They didn't really tell us why a poll, and knowing that other people support a similar decision, makes a poll uniquely coercive, why it necessarily undermines free choice. We put to you that people changing their mind based on democratic information is a good thing, and it's something that democracies should encourage because it's part of the continual process of discourse and debate that happens. Moreover, we put to you that people like minorities should be allowed to deal with things strategically. Sometimes, unfortunately, the very small parties they support might not win, like what my third speaker gave them in a point of information which they did not respond to. In these cases, we believe that people have the right to trade off having their views represented fully for having their views represented at all. And we think these are legitimate trade-offs and options that individuals should be allowed to make. So they didn't really show us why a herd mentality was necessarily coerced. The next thing they told us was that polls are bad because they can be distorted. Our first response is that we can make sure that organizations reveal information about the polls, like the sample size, for instance, like who was surveyed, like under what circumstances they were asked. Moreover, there are a variety of news outlets in modern societies that offer contrasting perspectives, so no single poll will be able to dominate political discourse. So we think that this concept of methodology is frankly irrelevant. The second question, does it undermine the vote? Their claim was that politicians will make decisions based on pragmatism and not ideology. Let's break this distinction. We think that pragmatism is good because governments need to take into account the views of people when making long-term policies. We shouldn't ignore them just because 4 years ago we voted in for a specific ideology. Moreover, polls can also be about ideology as well, to reflect changing preferences, to reflect whether or not people really want to continue supporting super liberal or super conservative ideas, for instance. Their argument is for the abolition of democracy, of our term limits that last for 10 years, so politicians can engage in things like long-term planning, the kind of long-term planning they want. So we think that governments need to continually assess the preferences of individuals for democracy to even work in the first place. I'm going to transition now to my first argument about how we help to improve democracy. First of this argument is that political polls help parties and politicians gauge popular opinion and make representative decisions. I think we can all agree that democracy exists so that governments can represent the people. Generally, parties have an incentive to cater to people because of the vote. However, polls help parties nuance decisions in a way that the vote does not. Why? Let's analyze the characteristics of political polls. First of all, they are far-reaching and aggregate the opinions of a large group of people. Secondly, polls help show people's opinions about specific issues or specific policies. Therefore, political parties can hence use polls to decide which issues they want to prioritize, both before and after their terms. They can use polls, for instance, test the waters. They can measure popular support for a specific policy.
Sir.
Yes.
If this is true, then why doesn't every single party, because it wants to win, simply choose the side that the majority of people chooses?
We think that often parties compete on a range of metrics, and not all of them agree on the same policies, right? Parties can support one policy, but support still a particular ideology. So we think that political polls, moreover, can be tailored to individual regions. So if we can see that a particular region supports a policy more than any other region, parties can tailor their decisions accordingly. So polls allow a huge scope for popular debate and for popular discussion. Moreover, polls allow parties information to decide where to campaign and where to focus their resources. Parties might often make decisions to deprioritize areas where they have no support, even though their support is in fact growing in volume. Polls allow parties to know which areas have growing support for them and can hence focus on campaigning to those areas to better integrate their interests. For example, when polls in Scotland in 2014 showed that support for the Conservative Party was declining, the Liberal Democrats made the decision to contest the area as a third party because they felt that they could win once the support for the Conservatives had diminished. As a consequence, Scottish voters then had an additional party to choose from, increasing their choice. Moreover, polls help parties make mid-term decisions because they can test the voters to see how popular a policy is. Their side said this is a bad thing because it's pragmatism. We disagree. Sometimes taking a look how people feel halfway through the term is a good thing. Like when the US government polled voters about whether or not they really wanted bailouts in the middle of the 2009 financial crisis. These functions can't be carried out by votes because votes don't reveal the specific issues that voters decide on. For example, voting for the Democrats in general doesn't mean that you support all of Obama's policies. Polls allow individuals and parties to realize which of their policies really have support. Moreover, votes only happen once every 4 years. Polls hence help parties reassess their preferences of voters, adapt to changing demands. Polls inform the decisions that parties make, both while they are campaigning and while they're in power. So while their side says this is undemocratic, we think this is fully in line with the spirit of democracy, which is to represent people as much as possible. Our second argument is that this informs voters. The thrust for this argument is that knowing what other people vote for helps to inform the decisions made by the individual. Premise: voting is sometimes about outcomes and choosing the most realistic policy or the most realistic outcome. People make decisions to vote based on what outcomes they want. Having information about what's popular helps people strategize decisions, helps them decide what trade-offs they should make. Often, the party that people want to vote for has no realistic chance of winning, but the second choice, perhaps one that represents their views less fully, has a chance. We feel it is acceptable for voters to decide to vote for their second choice to ensure that their interests are protected as much as possible. This is especially true of minorities, who often vote for small specific interests. Like, for example, Algerian migrants might want to vote for a small migrant party like La Traduco in France. Polls, however, reveal that they have such a small proportion of the vote that there is no chance they can win. Therefore, it's better for migrants to vote for their second choice, generally pro-immigrant parties like the SNP, rather than the United Front or the Parti United France in France. As a consequence, we think that individuals should be allowed to trade off getting their views represented fully for them being represented at all. And sometimes it's the regrettable fact of democracy that small parties are just not able to win in some constituencies. Therefore, polls are integral in helping voters make informed, legitimate decisions. We are very proud to stand in opposition.
8 minutes, 1 second. First opposition speaker for his speech. And now to continue the case for the opposition, I call upon Martin Sedgwick.
and gentlemen, in my speech I'm going to present you an argument, our split argument, how it follows voters' minds. But before that, let me move on to some rebuttals and to rebutting arguments. At first, the team of opposition was talking about proper representation. And they told us that it's better to choose a strong party, even if there are not so many benefits as we thought. Ladies and gentlemen, to this, we have the answer that it even furthermore boosts the strong party because you are giving them even more votes. Today, we have some strong parties which are not, as they already said, really representing some ideology, but are looking for many people changing their preferences according to polls, choosing the strategies to find as many voters as they can. But ladies and gentlemen, what is happening in the case of opposition is that we are giving them even more votes, and it stifles the process of finding new parties representing new ideologies with new voters, right? Because the voter has to decide to choose a strong party.
Point of information.
No, thank you. Instead of the benefits he wants, ladies and gentlemen, the strong parties are unbeatable in their case. The second point, what's wrong if they change their preferences? Ladies and gentlemen, to this, we believe that it is bad that in their case, it is never going to be the long-term policies, no thank you, long-term policies will never be fulfilled, right? Because if people in today's poll want something, if people want to build a road, for example, it is a process that takes some time and it is hard to finish, right? And if their preferences change, we believe that the party will change as well. They will never guarantee it because they will simply change because they want their preferences, they want more votes, and they will be simply populistic. So no long-term policies will be fulfilled.
So,
Yes.
do you believe that it's bad in representative democracy that parties do what people want?
Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that is bad. Those parties are populistic. They are not fulfilling what they promised to those people. Why those people actually elected those politicians into for example, government or houses, right? They have to prove what they promised. No thank you. The third point, how it improved the democracy. I already answered a bit of it, but ladies and gentlemen, simply would we believe that? What the side of opposition was telling us is that you can make a survey, and survey is made on a large group of people, representative group of people, which can actually show us answers to their questions, right? But we believe that this might work in psychology, for example, where you can have male or female, where you can have someone with a higher social class or lower social class, and they have some different preferences. But according to political ideas, we don't believe that there are some people that you can fundamentally categorize into some groups. No, thank you. You can categorize into some groups according to their sex, for example, or their social status, right? So we believe that it's really hard to find a representative group, and what the Team Opposition was saying, that those groups are, no thank you, enough big. We believe that 1,000 people, which are, according to them, are looked for representatively, are not enough to show us, and even show us the real answers. But even if they would be, we believe that these are easily,
Find the information.
no, thank you. You can easily not fulfill these, right? Because if you go to some neighborhood or some ghetto or of some city, those preferences of those people will really change your ideas, will really change the answers of the survey at all, right? You can go to maybe ethnic group of city and they will vote for a party that represents them better, right? So the survey is legally totally not legitimate. And to the strategy they were talking about, that you won't be able to find the preferences if you don't have these polls, and the politicians will not know. No, thank you. The politicians will not know who to represent or what to represent, what people want. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that it is not hard to find what people want, right? We can, for example, see what they say in news. We can see what they are fighting for. If they are maybe telling in the news that my kid needs to do school, or the school system is wrong because the tests at the end of the year end up not really well, right? We can find differently, but even if we don't find differently, we believe that we cleaner answers. And what the cleaner answers mean is that, ladies and gentlemen, we need to vote for politicians who are really representing us and who are not
Point of information,
just
sir.
looking for the really big group of people and not making their policies according to what people want, because those policies are never right and they are just trying not to do harm to so many people, because then those people would not vote them in next elections. So to our split argument and how it calms voters' minds. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that if poll asks you a preference and you answer, your answer determines in most cases what your next answer, that same poll or to actual elections. No, thank you, will be. This point consists of three subpoints. First, it's how people make decisions. Secondly, how you feel committed to your acts. And thirdly, how you how if you are committed to something, you are not so willing to invest more research. So to the first point, how people make decisions. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. In front of ourselves, we sometimes need to justify, or in most cases, we need to justify our decisions, right? We need to be happy about our decisions. We need to know that we make as good decisions as we possibly can. And we believe that if we are justifying our decisions after we do them, ladies and gentlemen, we are more easily able to think of them even afterwards that they were the right decision, right? Not just feel more guilty in front of ourselves. So if people make decisions and they afterwards justify them, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that it strengthens they believe in the decision they made early, right? Second point, how I feel more committed to what I did to answer what I answered to the survey in the status score. Ladies and gentlemen, if I answered some question and the elections will ask me that same question again, who will I vote for example, I am committed to the answer simply because I don't want to look inconsistent of myself. Or at first I justified it, and later I don't want to look like I don't have my own idea, even if no one else sees this. And thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, we are already committed to some decisions. We believe that we invest less research afterwards to finding new ideas, or we will not be looking for the new information of the political parties afterwards, right? Because simply we are sufficient with our decision, simply because we are committed to it and we believe it because we justify it. And ladies and gentlemen, this is empirically proven and classified as a legitimate cognitive bias, right? Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that in today's debate, we prove you that you have to have democracy that represents people and not make populism, and that single proposition of bringing you a model where this actually happens. For all these reasons, I told you, we beg you to propose.
Thank the second opposition speaker for his speech. And now to continue the case for the opposition, I call upon Brian Yen.
proposition presented a rather confusing case. So let's clear it up by asking two questions. How do political polls impact democracy, and how do political polls impact policy? But before I do that, let's make a very quick remark that I want you to keep in mind when you listen to these two issues. When people vote for a party, it is often not intrinsically just for the party in and of itself. It is a means by which you vote for a policy or you vote for your best interests. We have to remember this in analyzing how people vote and therefore what democracy should uphold. So, the first question about democracy, how does it impact democracy? Their biggest argument was that it causes herd voting, so this is a bad thing. We ask, why is this necessarily a wrong thing? In fact, we always know that your choices are most legitimate when they are most informed. So, why is it a bad thing to be informed about how everyone else is voting and make a decision on that basis? We heard no response from their side. We further put that strategic voting can sometimes be a good thing. Let's recognize, no party fully represents your interests. If voting is a means to get the best interest, sometimes voting strategically is the most important to reduce, for example, minority oppression, an argument my first speaker brought to you, but we heard no response. We give you a very good example of how we control politics. After a political poll showed that the Green Party, which was, by the way, the most friendly to indigenous tribes, was not going to win, they needed to switch to vote for the Labour Party in order to ensure that the Democratic Party did not get as many seats because it was unfriendly to indigenous tribes. So, in this way, we allow minority parties to strategically and represent their best interests. So if hard voting allows for the best of democracy, we believe we should allow this. But we further put, even if hard voting was a bad thing, would that mean that you ban rallies? Because ostensibly, if I walk past rally and see how many people are attending it, I can sort of gauge the kind of support for this party. Would it ban volunteerism? Because if I look at the number of volunteers on volunteer list, I can somehow gauge as well the support for the party. In fact, would I even ban political ads? Because many political parties can show on advertisements that they are popular. What we are in fact doing is breaking the hold on information that political parties have. We are democratizing information that is now only held within the arms of the elite, and we believe that is a great thing for democracy. They claim people strengthen their belief in their decisions. Okay, so what's wrong with that? But no response. Just stating that it's a cognitive bias does not at all prove that it's a bad thing. Second, they said people are more committed to their belief because they don't want to look like they're inconsistent. Okay, they put you bad at secrecy. So no one will know what you remember eventually, so you can't be accused of being inconsistent anyway. But more fundamentally, when the second speaker talked about being consistent and being committed, this was a contradiction of their first speaker's argument. Because if I were really consistent, and what I vote in the poll would be what I vote eventually, then hard voting wouldn't happen. Because the result of the poll wouldn't affect how I eventually vote. So their second speaker's argument directly contradicts their first speaker's argument. This is what made that case so confusing. We stood firm that allowing these polls is the best of democracy, and therefore we all take this. Second area of clash. What is best for policy? So they claim it is now populist because people are responding to popular opinion based on polls. We give it another word to call this. This is called representation. Very often, we put that representation is often at fault in current states of democracy. You know why? Because I'm only allowed to vote for one single party which represents a whole series of views every 1 to 4 years, sometimes even 6 years. Which means very often I'm unable to tell you what specifically is my best interest and the policies I want. Because very often voting for parties only involves sweep of policies on a specific time. More than that, research suggests that allowing parties to tailor their policies to individual needs and individual best interests is what best upholds democracy and is the best form of policy we can use.
If representation is so important, why do we have direct votes? Why do we need representations from educated politicians?
Direct votes and polls are almost similar in terms of effect. The only difference very often is that they are non-contradictory. So, this is the response I was going to be made about bringing up now. Very often, politicians are willing to use referendum to assess their policies because it's often binding, which means that at the point at which they suggest this as possibly up for political opinion, it becomes very difficult for them to back away when the results come out. Now we allow more governments to be amenable to the idea of taking in people's responses, taking in the opinion from the public without having to commit to representing these opinions. If they do eventually represent it, perhaps it's a great thing. If they don't, at least we don't commit them and make them wary of even putting these polls out in the first place. But then they made a bizarre statement, which is that the news can tell you what people want. If that were true, then they would ban the news as well, because they don't want popular representation. So this is a bit odd. Unless they're really telling us they're going to ban the news, please clarify this in us. Next, they said polling by a specific group changes the result. Yes, that's the point. So I know what each individual group wants and what is each individual group's best interest. So exactly that's how we tailor policy, the best democracy, the best policy. But let's talk about their grounds of accountability and perhaps distortion as well. My substantive argument now, how we increase accountability. The first way we do this is by removing the distorted power of lobbyists. So, as much as we believe that every man should have one vote, lobbyists in politics often have disproportionate power because of the funding that they could provide, because of their corporate might in society. This is an undemocratic influence and often goes unchecked because many of these negotiations, political parties and lobby groups often happen behind doors. What makes this worse is that lobbyists often claim to be democratic. So many lobbyists say, this is the popular opinion and I'm siding with the popular opinion. The problem is, only with the voting result, it's very difficult to tell whether people in fact did support these lobbies. Policies, polls can change this because at the point in which we can poll individuals on specific policies, we can understand whether or not the lobbies were truly accountable. That is why, when the NRA claimed that gun control was unpopular, a poll eventually held them to account when it showed that 70% of Americans wanted gun control. So, this is how we remove the distorted power of lobbyists. At the very least, we give people information, and at the very worst, we allow people to make assessments on this basis and who they want to vote for in the future. Second way in which we increase accountability, we combat electoral fraud. So, as ballot counting is a highly private practice, as ostensibly both sides admit, individual states often abuse the power they have and warp poll results. Political opinion polls conducted by non-governmental organizations can keep these practices in check. In 2011, for example, a poll by Reporters Without Borders found that Enrique Peña Nieto inflated poll results by 65%. Eventual international pressure caused him to realize and caused him to give him consensus, such as by removing the state control over the media. So, what we do when we allow political polls is we ensure that politicians are not given the leeway to warp all election results as they wish and keep politicians in check. That is important. The third reason we improve accountability is because we do not give them extended government power. And this is important because their policy allows for a myriad of things to be considered political opinion poll, or a myriad of things to be considered representative of what the government wants. Ostensibly, they don't want this. So, if they already admitted the news to represent the people, if they admitted the polls to represent the people, we could do values and volunteers also can. The problem with this is that often in those states, governments get to decide what the definition of a political opinion poll is, or get to decide what the definition of representing the people is. So at this point, it gives governments huge leeway to clamp down on things like polls by NGOs on whether people feel oppressed, clamp down on things like the news, which would ostensibly represent people, but they're going to say, we should clamp down on this because we don't want populist policies. This is terrible because it allows individual states to whitewash their own crimes and their own practices. We increase accountability, we better policy, we better democracy, we stand firmly on democracy.
Thank the second opposition speaker for his speech. Now to continue the case for the proposition, I call upon Martin Chavas.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking 5 questions in my speech. Firstly, whether politicians can and should be allowed to collect some information about their voters. Now, firstly, we say that in our system, even if we ban polling results, politicians still can get some idea of what their polling stations look like. For instance, they can see raw data such as the demographic statistics, or they can see past election results and get some idea about what their election base looks like. What we say is that the point where we want to ban them getting information is the point where they can at any time pay for a poll, because poll gives them a very direct sense of what exactly at that certain moment all the people want. Why is this so? Because if we stop their ability to get information at that point, it is much harder for them to strategize and scrutinize, as we have shown you, and there's a much lower chance of pragmatic every 4 year changing parties. What I've shown you is that in our systems, these politicians can get some idea, therefore can get all the benefits that they can show you, such as where to put resources, or where to propagate more. But no, thank you, sir. They cannot cross the line and start scrutinizing and strategizing as we have shown you. Question number 2: should a politician be pragmatic? And this is not the whole notion of a politician should only do what they should want. Well, we say yes. No, thank you, sir. We say yes, he should. It is a very simplistic notion of what a politician actually is. Why is this so? 1. A politician, dear ladies and gentlemen, still does what the people want in our system, because still the option which most people favor is selected in elections. The same thing that they propagate happens. So thank you, sir. Happens in our system. Secondly, we say that if a politician is not pragmatic and not changing views every 4 years, but rather he truly stands behind his own values and has one policy which he might support, one political stance which he might support for more years, there's a good chance of long-term projects, right? Because if we have shown you that since politicians cannot get much information, then they lose the ability in our system to, strategize and scrutinize and change their views every 4 years. They have to hold one. They have to be true. They have to hold one consistent view over the years. And we say that if that in their system, politicians are not able to do long-term projects, because if they were to invest money in a project that will come out 10 years ago, then their political preferences might change in 10 years, and therefore this project might not suit them in 10 years. Therefore, finally, in our system, these long-term projects, because politicians are stable in their views and cannot or simply don't have such an easy ability to change, we say that these long-term projects have won. There are 3 reasons why this is important. Firstly, we forgot crucial things like, thank you, sir, security of the state, energies, roads. These things require a longer time, and in such a system, they will not happen because politicians simply change and adapt to whatever people want at a certain time. Second, in our system, politicians can take a long-term direction and not use resources in different ways or in different political directions every year. Therefore, resources are rather from in one direction. No, thank you, sir. Very consistently. Thirdly, we for instance look at the examples of some authoritarian economies, such as Singapore, which have been very successful just because they've been very a little authoritarian. Then the leader did not have to look at things such as public support. That is why he could execute policies very efficiently, because they simply need not care what the public thinks at that certain moment. No, thank you, sir. Another question: should you elect a second best option simply because it is more powerful? And to this religion, we say no, because 1, this is not, thank you, sir, a legitimate criterion. We say that politics voting is ideal when I am able to only project my political views and my idea of what an ideal state is into the vote, right? And no, thank you, sir. when I start to strategize that this party is stronger than this, so I should tell this, this is not a criteria which will project my exact opinions or my exact idea of how an ideal world looks to my vote. Therefore, this is no longer legitimate and should not be in an ideal democracy. No, thank you, sir. Secondly, we say that what might happen in the system is that my best interests do not get represented. Why is this so? If I am, as they say, a minority, have some minority party which gets very low support, only because I see the low poll, only because I see it, I then decide, no, thank you, sir, only because I see it, I then decide that I will not vote and rather give my vote to a stronger party. As I explained to you, their system, if a party is relatively strong, gives it even more strength because people want the vote for it because they want their vote to count. But on the other hand, in minutes, sir, if the party has small number in the preferences, it will go even smaller. What could happen that if I were not in the system and would truly vote only on what I want, the party would get to parliament and enact my policies. In their system, I rather give my vote to a party which doesn't fully represent me and therefore lose benefits. Yes, sir.
If democracy is only about what the individual wants, would you ban rallies or talking to your friends for politics?
I don't see why, sir. You shouldn't. We say that in here. We say, for instance, by talking to your friends, you can get new ideas, you get new conceptions, you can learn new information about how some party works, and then maybe decide that that party is alright for you. As we have shown you here, I might not vote for the party which best represents me only because I think it's weak, and that party in our model might get into parliament because people no more consider strength. Fourth question: is information always the best thing? This is something again that they very much simplified. They simply tell us that more information means more democracy. We don't see any justification on this. We've shown you cases where more information causes irrational biases, and this leads to a less rational decision. But two, even if information would cause more democracy, this was not accurate. We've shown you how one, the methodology is hard, therefore these studies are very rarely ever accurate. Secondly, if they are, this is even more likely if they are being done by news outlets and other non-scientific sources. Therefore, even if information would cause more democracy, the information they are getting from the polls is not necessarily accurate, therefore not usable in this principle. Question number 5. This is about their split argument about lobbies. So, essentially, the idea that they tell us is that, no, thank you, with polls, you can get an idea of how much opinion, of how much lobbying there is, because you see what's the difference between what policies are enacted and what people actually do. Here, ladies and gentlemen, even in our system, there are ways to get this information, such as you can look at, well, who is lobbying for what is he lobbying, how much fund is he pouring into it. But even if this method that they say would actually be more advanced, we do not see any real life impact of this argument, because even if you are better able to identify the problem, they do not solve it in any way, and we can identify it just as that. Dear ladies and gentlemen, now that I've asked these final questions, we need to look at what they have, what impact do they have for this debate. In our case, we showed you there are many places where the projection of my views into my vote doesn't actually happen. We showed you the herd bias, we showed you the second cognitive bias, which they actually never reacted to in our split argument. Secondly, not only that there are less places like these, but we also say that there's more opinion for abuse. It's our whole big argument for two speeches, which they have never reacted. Their system inherently carries more abuse. Because of these two reasons, because my views are projected less, this system is more abuse, this is not a democracy Team Slovakia would like to live in. Thanks.
thank the third proposition speaker for his speech. And now to continue the case for the opposition, I call upon Ernest Goh.
I have two questions. First, is an informed vote a wrong one? And second, do polls empower representative democracy? One, is an informed vote a wrong one? We told you right from the beginning of this debate that votes are not just expressions of some vague, indeterminate political identity, but necessarily of strategic trade-offs and trade-offs. And we said it's right for a voter to trade off the integrity of his expression for the relative certainty that his voice is heard. And we've heard absolutely no response why me and I as an individual have no right to make this trade-off by myself. We've asked them, why do outcomes not matter, but only processes? And we've seen absolutely no response. The only real semblance of a response we heard was, this is wrong because it gives one party more power, so it might get into parliament. It's already come to this, guys. At the point that a minority decides, I don't want to vote for this party because it's not going to get into power, another party is already having a stranglehold on the democratic process. The real question is, which of these other parties is less bad? And that's the question we asked you right from the beginning of this debate. Again, no response. So we said, this debate is about this. No. If an Arab migrant in France knows his immigrant party will not get into power anyway, is he wrong to vote for Sarkozy and not Marine Le Pen because the latter and her National Front party wants to drive the virus out of Paris? We said, that seems to me to be an eminently sensible way to vote. We have absolutely no idea from their side why it's wrong. In fact, we said, all these trade-offs exist on either side of the house because absolutely no party can represent absolutely every single one of your political opinions. So necessarily on either side, your integrity of your expression is always compromised to an extent. So both teams that agree to an extent that elections are sometimes for the outcomes, not just for some vague, indeterminate political identity. I think we can all agree on this, otherwise they will not support democracy. But the final nail in their coffin was this. They agreed with us. They agreed with us because they told us that fine rallies. When a supporter would turn up in a rally, you can see how many other supporters are there and therefore supposedly sway his opinion. No thank you. They're fine volunteering. When I put in my hours to vote for the Democrat Party and see how many other people are similarly willing to make their sacrifice. Why is it that I'm not influenced the exact same way in the herd mentality that they have taught? We absolutely don't know. We asked them about talking to your friends and they said, this was when their case began to slip and slide. They said, that's great because you can find out more perspectives. There seems to be a little bit like, when you read information, decide what generally other people like, and if you would like to counterbalance your opinions against those things. So absolutely no distinction. But finally, they said, we have alternatives so politicians can still be represented. We asked them, what are these alternatives? They said, election results. One, this happened after the election. I submit this is a bad way for democracy because you wait 4 more years for your voice to be heard. Second, this is concessionary because why would everyone else be influenced at the next election and therefore just want outdated information in a far worse way, in a sort of perverse herd mentality the next time round? So it absolutely is not clear what the distinction is between this and every single other process that quite readily to legitimize in the democratic process. So first and foremost, an informed vote is the right vote. Don't let them claim that just because the outcomes are a little bit strange, people have no right to weigh these up for themselves. Democracy privileges the voice of an individual, and it's this voice that we are very proud to defend right now. But my second question is, do they empower representative democracy? And the first most important response we heard was, we don't like representative democracy. We want long-term planning that's based on the vote but nothing else. First and foremost, that's an argument against democracy. Let's be clear what that language is like. They said, it's bad if political parties do things to win votes or gain power.
No, sir.
I'm sorry, that seems to be genuinely the calculus of every single party. So you can't claim this to be the case if you're willing to stand for democracy in general. No. They said parties should support ideologies, not populist sentiment. Again, every single party does this because that's their incentive. So if they're willing to stand for this, we said, if populism is bad, why you support it every 4 years? There's absolutely no reason why that case makes any principled sense. So, if both things can agree that democracy has some function, why do we genuinely try to take into account the views of people? Because their lives are the ones affected by policy making. The exact stance we've given you right in the beginning. I put to you that it's wrong for a government to go to war without first asking its citizens and its soldiers. They would say no, but you didn't vote that way in the past election 4 years ago. You didn't know about the ISIS threat. We said people should now reassess their preferences because that's part of the deliberative process. New information emerges. People should have the right to determine if their opinions have changed in response to those things. Absolutely no response. But finally we said, but they tell us that they're long-term projects. I put you that long-term projects can sometimes be wrong. They said security and they quoted Singapore. Coming from Singapore, I can tell you why security can sometimes be a bad thing left to autocrats. Because you know in Singapore that we have a law that allows you to detained for many years without trial, absolutely no trial, just as long as the government continues to secretly there. That seems to me to be something that people should have the right to vote away because their consciences don't align with that principle. But that's how we know the voters didn't say we wanted that, so the government should be autocratic. So at the point that they began defending authoritarianism, I think that case fell because they no longer believe in democracy, but insincerely believe in its general functions and its processes. Yes.
We believe there should be balance between long-term development of the country and public opinion.
Oh, so what is this balance? Outdated information that comes 4 years before and you have no right to change this information? I submit that if you want a balance, then let the balance be struck by our team where people can assess their preferences and make these things known to politicians. So that's the balance we're finally strike. Back to my argument. Finally, the only last response was given to us in the point of information when they said, how about direct democracy? You really believe that the voices of people matter so much. Why don't you have direct democracy? Our response is, maybe we should. Maybe we quite support the Swedish and the Switzerland model where people can petition for a referendum as long as enough votes are carried out and can be gathered. So our response is, even on that final last parallel, we're quite interested if you agree with that principle. And therefore, that last remaining principle parallel doesn't stack. So how does our team empower representative democracy, given that it is important? 3 ways. First, because it informs what stances to take. Because people vote on a range of issues once every 4 years. Politicians should be allowed to know in a nuanced fashion what people want and whether or not these preferences have changed over time. Yes, polls are dubious, but it's a response for us, this is an argument for us to make more polls that review in more detailed fashion the sample size, the geography of where that poll was held out. Furthermore, we'll point out that if they support rallies, politicians do these kind of obfuscating language on either side of the house. So the real question is, on which side do we break their monopoly on power? Because these politicians who have every incentive to lie to them, they're really stronger than they really are. So what we actually do, as we told you in our second series, is democratize the information process. The real question of this debate, given that obfuscatory language is used on either side, is whether or not we can break that hold on power. We've said we do, and that's why polls do have a unique function. So first and foremost, we have a more nuanced stance on the part of parties because they know what people want. That's not something that they have on theirs. Second, we said we allow parties to know where to campaign. We said sometimes parties shy away from competition from big parties on the basis of reputation, even when support is actually waning, because they don't know this in the absence of polls. This means that they pull out areas like Scotland because they don't know that they can actually stand a shot. And this is undemocratic because one party has a virtual hegemony over the area. That's not democracy when you have one or two parties to vote for and the other is really, really lousy. We require people to know where they stand a shot so that they can go in and democratize the voting process. Again, absolutely no response. Third, we said we break lobby power and other abuses. We said it's wrong often, and this is the way lobbyists work. They tend to fabricate that their ideas are a popular mandate. They claim to say, generally, many veterans and Americans will support less gun laws. And this is bad, and we can only review their lies if we have general censuses that show that they are lying. The response is there are other ways we can see who's funding them. We really tend to know, because the point of funding is to be public. So the real question is, how do we show that they are lying, not how do we know who's funding who, because they generally are quite proud to say the NRA funds the Republican Party. And we've said our side allows for people to do that, because generally the point of our substantive was not to say we now know who funds who, but now that we can expose their rhetoric as lies. That's not something they have. Politicians will still continue to be misled and carry the rhetoric of lobbies that we say are undemocratic. Again, no response. So on the back of these 3 responses, representative democracy is good and our team protects it better. For all these reasons, knowledge is power.
now move on to the team's 4-minute concluding reply speeches. The opposition will deliver their reply speech first. There are no points of information during reply speeches. After 3 minutes, the timekeeper will signal once to let the speaker know that they have 1 minute left. After 4 minutes, the timekeeper will signal twice. To deliver the opposition's reply speech, I call upon Ryan Yen.
Team opposition was one that was rather inconsistent. They wanted to first go against populist policies, but eventually by second talked about authoritarian democracies, and by third eventually reverted back to somehow striking a balance between the law and law. As much as they were inconsistent, let's look at the world in which they created and how democracy would look in the world of opposition. Every 6 years, you would hit the ballot box and drop in a single tick for the party you're going to vote for. Suppose that this tick is supposed to represent every single one of your policies, every single one of your interests. And the policies that are enacted on the basis of that tick, which often are unrepresentative of what you really do, because no party can exactly match every single one of your best interests, is unchanging. Because only after 6 years can you make a different decision. Only after 6 years, really, that the earth starts turning again and things start to change in the real world. Even when instances like the rise of new parenthoods or maybe an economic downturn occurs, governments are only given information from past election results, which hardly even show what people want in a current downturn, what people want in a current state of crisis, not the current sentiment of the current voters, or voters in about 6 or 4 years ago. Because they believe that they should have some information, but not all of this information. A bit bizarre if you listen closely. They believe that representation is apparently a bad thing, because people shouldn't be allowed to have their interests represented by a government. The government should always stay the same, because their interest 6 years ago must be their interest over these 6 years. For minorities, they continue to vote for a small party that they always think at the end, but it never does, and very unfortunately sometimes the most anti-minority party gets into power, implements oppressive policies that they cannot overturn because only after 6 years their views change. Only after 6 years the minorities do not want to be oppressed. Lobbyists deceive individuals and illegal states continue making people believe in distorted election results. They remove checks and balances with polls, and by removing polls, they effectively remove true elections. Let's look at the world of the opposition and how we fare in comparison to this world of the opposition. We realize that every vote is nominated trade-offs, so your interests cannot be represented fully by any single party. And our job is very simple. We want to help you make these trade-offs. We want to give you enough information for you to understand how you can vote in a way that maximizes your best interests. Sometimes this involves strategic voting. That is perfectly fine. What we implement is a series of polls. So everyone can conduct polls, everyone can be audited, as major news corporations often do. With a myriad of polls to ensure that they check each other, so not any poll is manipulated, or at very least people know who the poll is manipulated. And what we allow is for people to adjudicate between the long-term interest and the short-term interest. So, if I don't believe that the government should be allowed to detain me without trial, maybe I can vote against that. But if I do believe the government should start investing more in the economy, for example, I can vote for that as well. We allow people this choice in the midst of an election, in the midst of a term. People can be represented, and the brilliant example of Singapore kind of works against them. Because as much as we are an authoritarian country, sometimes we selectively choose the opinion polls. And the most recent one saw that people wanted more funding and transfer, and the government did that in time. This is what we call representation. Minorities can be represented as well, because they vote for the party that we know is least anti-minority. At the very least, maybe they can't vote for the best party, but the party wouldn't have voted anyway. So they can vote for the party that best suits their interests in the here and now, in the paradigm of this democracy. Most importantly, checks and balances continue to exist, and people are not deceived into making decisions on the basis of false election results, on the basis of documents telling them. We believe that knowledge is power, and for all these reasons, we stood very firmly on team opposition.
opposition and the debate as a whole, I call upon Team Slovakia.
Green Party, Czech Republic, came to an election 6 months before the election process. No one expected anything from them. They were new. No one knew them. But what happened is that they paid the poll, showed in that poll that they have high preferences. What people saw was that they have maybe new chance to vote for something. Maybe there is someone new to represent them, and they simply got to parliament because of abusing the system. That is the one thing we were proposing. We never heard the reaction from this opposition. Ladies and gentlemen, how this works? We believe that the abuse is so easily done. For example, it depends on wording, how you understand and how you react to different questions. What happened in the case of organ donation and in the states of Finland and Denmark was that it made the surveys that everyone in the hospital had to fulfill. What happened in Finland was that the wording of the question whether they would or would not donate organs was positively worded, and 90% of people answered that yes, they would donate organs. What happened in Denmark instead was that the question was worded negatively because no one thought of that, and only 10% of people said that yes, they would donate organs. We see that it's so easy to abuse the system. Only depends on wording. For example, we showed you that why of course the parties would want to do this is that they want to find voters, they want to get elected, right? They never reacted from the side population. And we believe that this is not really democratical because it doesn't really depend on people's real opinions. It depends on the poll that can be used, and then people decide if we should. The second one, the actual impact. Ladies and gentlemen, we never saw the actual impact of what the opposition was saying, how the political parties, if they can't see the goal, they can't precisely determine their policies, they cannot precisely represent those people. Ladies and gentlemen, we had few answers at first that it is really right because they can fulfill their ideologies and fully represent what they were fighting for at the beginning. And secondly, if they are in the government and people are not fully represented, they can show them. They can say that they are not they don't feel represented, and then politicians can do something about it. We don't see a reason why before they are elected into your government, they should know whether people's preferences change or not. It never showed us impact on the people who don't see what it is. Ladies and gentlemen, the second thing they never showed us impact on was the lobbying. Ladies and gentlemen, we again don't see, as our third speaker was saying, the impact of if the lobbying is there. And the fourth point, ladies and gentlemen, we brought you point of abuse and point of how people have called it minds if they, as our split argument, if they fulfill the call before, ladies and gentlemen, they never reacted to any of those. We showed you that the abuse is simply not democratical because people are not deciding by their legal preferences. And ladies and gentlemen, we showed you that even if the poll is there and people, according to their first answer in the poll, have determined answers later, again, non-democratic decisions. Ladies and gentlemen, because we showed that the democracy is really represented only in our society when people are not, or their decisions don't differ, and if their decisions are right, we believe that we should